Don't you dare come back, Baldy. As I returned home exhausted from work, merciless words and my daughter's school bag were hurled at me. You're not needed. You're not a father. Don't come back home. When you come back, the house feels darker. And don't you dare show up at the parent-teacher day. It would be so embarrassing if people found out you're my dad. My daughter, Cindy, was in the living room, hurling these words at me as I stood in the hallway by the entrance. From the living room where she was, I could see the kitchen where my wife, Susan, was. Cindy could see what expression Susan was making. I couldn't. Susan said nothing to the abusive words from our daughter. She just silently continued with whatever she was doing in the kitchen. I held back. Saying anything now would only add fuel to the fire. Can't you just not come back? You're useless, not even making enough money. It was Susan who first hurled such abuse. Having seen that, Cindy started to do the same to me. She wears her uniform skirt so short it almost reveals her underwear and dyes her long hair to a blondish brown. She wears large contact lenses to make her eyes appear bigger, false eyelashes, and makeup. Though I turn a blind eye, the clothes Cindy leaves lying around are too flashy for a student, resembling those of a nightclub worker. She hardly attends school and seems to roam the downtown areas instead. I've warned her numerous times, not minding the arguments it causes. But Susan has never once reprimanded her. I recently realized that Susan has been buying Cindy makeup and flashy clothes just because she asked for them. She has been spoiling Cindy, confusing being a kind mother with being a dependent, ineffective parent. How did it come to this? My dream was to have a family. A family filled with smiles, a treasure for a lifetime. I didn't expect a baseball team-sized family, but I dreamt of playing catch in the yard with a son and buying a wedding gown for a daughter to keep as a bridal gift. I bought a house with a yard for this dream family and gritted my teeth at work every day to pay the mortgage. I was all about baseball in my school days and never really studied. Surviving in a world of an office worker, chasing numbers every day, was not going to be easy without extraordinary effort. I had never even used a computer before, so I gave up my weekend and, swallowing my pride, attended a computer class for beginners. Most of my allowance went to drinks with my boss. It was never enjoyable, just listening to sermons over drinks. All to get on the boss's good side. To climb the corporate ladder, survive in the company, protect my family, and realize my dreams. It's not something I can proudly boast about, but I was skilled at ingratiating myself with seniors during gatherings and securing their help to navigate the corporate environment more easily. This was because I had become accustomed to gauging the moods of my seniors back in my baseball club days during school. My allowance used to be $500 a month, but it was cut down for trivial reasons, and now it's just $30. The reasons for my allowance being cut weren't significant. It was for things like breaking a dish while washing or forgetting to buy the milk I was asked to get on my way home. Unable to engage in internal sales to win over my boss, I had to compete on merit with colleagues who had studied properly in college. But I couldn't give up. It was all to afford a spacious house with a yard, to spare Susan the hardships I went through, and to let her focus on raising our children. Upon graduating from college, I joined a company that sells and maintains office computers, telephones, fax machines, and internet connections. Our company has branches nationwide. I was assigned to a regional city in the New York area. I drove around unfamiliar lands in a compact car from morning till night. Susan, who was newlywed at the time, followed me. As the team assistant of the baseball team, Susan was quite popular. She wasn't a stunning beauty, but her cheerful and graceful demeanor often got her compared to famous TV anchors or magazine models. She was my pride and joy as a girlfriend, and then as my wife. Back then, I was truly happy. But what about now? It feels like I'm trapped in a bad dream. Don't ever come back, you Baldy. Who could have imagined that such harsh words would come from Susan, who was so adorable 20 years ago? Now, our daughter Cindy is following in Susan's footsteps, hurling abuse and vitriol my way. And they team up to splurge on clothes and bags, which is just unbearable. Susan and Cindy have become a codependent mother-daughter duo, spoiling each other rotten. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. I'm only 35 years old. Yet, I am indeed 35. My hairline has receded, my forehead widened. My hair has lost its thickness, and wrinkles have appeared on my face. My belly has started to sag. The body I had honed through sports is now a thing of the past. With age, I've keenly felt the decline of my physical capabilities. The ace pitcher of the baseball team that I once was is no more. Yet, I refuse to give up. Being tired and berated every day can't be all there is to my life. After all, Susan and I once vowed eternal love for each other. And isn't it pitiful for Cindy to grow up without proper guidance? As a father, it's my duty to wake them up and show them the right path. If I don't give up and produce results at work, maybe Susan and Cindy will have a change of heart. Until that day comes, I've resolved to keep working hard. Without being able to relax at home and still tired, I faced another morning. Ideally, home is where one relaxes and recovers from fatigue, but I found more relaxation at work these days. I've been with the same company since graduating from college, now in my 8th year. I've been fortunate to have trustworthy colleagues and seniors I respect, and while we're rivals, there's mutual respect among us. The sales department for communication devices had a strong athletic vibe, with everyone having been involved in some sport during their student days. And for some reason, many of the male salesmen came from homes where the wives held significant sway. Despite each of us carrying our own burdens, it was a good workplace where we felt like comrades. And there was a source of comfort there too. Her name was Ellie. Good morning. Ellie was the sales support lady who handled the accounts I brought in. With her glasses, she seemed like a calm and gentle woman at first glance. In her late 20s, she joined last year. Initially, I was concerned about her being new to employment due to some circumstances, but those concerns were unfounded. She never made a mistake in processing the accounts I brought in, and despite her gentle demeanor, she was quick in handling post-order procedures. Thanks to Ellie, I could always deliver smoothly to the clients. Lately, she even started creating proposal materials I could use during client presentations in her spare time. Bringing brochures and estimates to clients is a given, but having proposal documents tailored to the client's needs based on the information gathered during meetings leaves a lasting impression. It's enough to outdo our competitors. Tom, great work. How did today's appointments for future acquisitions go? Ellie, you too. Today I got an appointment with this client. Saying so, it had become a routine for me to report to Ellie the details of the day's events and the appointments I secured with clients after work. Gradually, I found myself looking forward to these moments. When I returned to the office, Ellie greeted me with a smile. Today's client was Johnson Trading, a well-established company, right? How did it go? I started to report on my day. I had even spent time during work thinking about how to make my story interesting and amusing for her. I met with President Johnson. He's a stubborn old man who shouts no sales calls whenever work comes up, but he seems to have a soft spot for his grandchild. He spent the whole time talking about his grandchild. He showed me a ton of photos on his computer. He has so many videos stored that his computer has become incredibly slow. So, I suggested he stop storing them on his computer and start using the cloud for his photos and videos. He then agreed to an appointment for a future proposal. Ali always had a great reaction to my stories. Wow, you got a follow-up appointment from talking about his grandchild's photos. And you even proposed using the cloud to someone as old school and stubborn as President Johnson. That's amazing. I'll make sure to create a proposal document that's easy for the elderly to understand and that even a stubborn old man would appreciate. Normally, creating proposal documents would be a hassle, but having Ellie happily take on this task was soothing for me. It would be even better if it led to a successful deal. Achievements made alone are great, but accomplishments achieved as a team, with the effort of two people, hold many times more value. As far as I know, such teams bring more luck to the company. Despite everything, I might just be lucky. How dare you show your face here, you Baldy? Don't act like a father when you can't even earn, Baldy. No matter what insults await me at home, I will not give up. As long as I have a place at the company and a family I swore to protect, I must never give up. That day, what awaited me upon returning home was an even more intense barrage of insults from Susan and Cindy. And it was no wonder. Today marked the end of the fiscal year, and my branch had barely managed to stay in the black, with most of the team failing to meet their quotas. As a result, unfortunately, our bonuses were cut to a third. Thankfully, with Ellie's help, I had met my quota. But from the management's perspective, it was a collective responsibility. My efforts, sadly, went unrewarded this year. I suffered the same fate as the rest of the team with a uniform bonus cut. I was certainly afraid of Susan and Cindy, who were furiously berating me. I'm not to blame. It was the others who performed poorly. Ugly words of shifting the blame onto my colleagues were about to escape my lips. I almost said it. But then it crossed my mind that such behavior is inexcusable. My teammates might be a bit foolish, but they are sincere people. Even if they are not performing well now, there might come a time when I could help them. I couldn't bring myself to blame them, even if they weren't there to hear it. You've been out all day, haven't you? You smell of sweat. Could you not come near the living room anymore? I don't have my own room. If I'm banned from the living room, where am I supposed to go? I heard something. My chair, newspapers, and even my cell phone charger were thrown into the hallway. It was Cindy who had thrown them from the living room into the hallway. A worthless, stinky old man with no earnings. Don't you ever pretend to be a father again. Susan didn't stop her. Instead, she peeked from the kitchen and said, "If your only skill is earning money, and you can't even do that, you're less than a person, less than an ATM." Unlike Cindy, who was venting her anger, Susan had a cold smile. That smile was twisted and ugly, reflecting the work nature of Susan's inner self. Susan, she used to be so adorable, so cheerful and popular with everyone. Has 20 years changed her so much? I sat alone on a chair in the hallway, too exhausted to move. I was hungry, but of course, there was no meal forthcoming. I clenched my teeth and held back the tears. Yet, I have to work tomorrow. I have to go to the company. With the company in a tight spot, if I were unable to work, our branch would surely fall into the red. I had to somehow take a bath, cleanse myself, and get some sleep, or I wouldn't be able to work the next day. Meanwhile, in the living room, Susan and Cindy were laughing out loud while watching a comedy show. I remembered seeing them post a selfie on social media yesterday with the hashtag #BestFriendsParentChild. Who would imagine that behind that best friends parent-child duo, there was a father being ousted to the hallway? Dragging my exhausted body, I managed to take a bath, then collapsed onto the chair in the hallway. Out of habit, I checked my phone. On the screen, Susan and Cindy sparkled like beautifully edited actresses. How did it come to this? Gradually, sleepiness overcame my fatigue. And so, I ended up greeting the morning on that chair in the hallway. The next morning, I woke up feeling anything but refreshed and zoned out at my desk for a while. Then, a kind voice reached me. "Tom." Huh? It had been hours since I'd spoken to anyone, so my voice was barely there. "Good morning, Tom." Ellie was waving her hand in front of me, trying to catch my attention. "Ah, Ellie, right. Sorry, good morning. What's wrong? Did something happen? You don't seem yourself. Usually, you are here 30 minutes before start time and dash out for visits right at the bell, but it's already 9:30. Saying so, her glasses glinted. In them, my anxious face was reflected as if they were mirrors. Her eyes seemed to probe into my soul with a sharp glint. "Did something happen, Tom? I can't hide anything from you, can I, Ellie?" I slumped back into my desk chair. I tried to laugh it off, but she didn't join in. Her expression was dead serious. "Let's go for a drink." There was no escaping it. Sure." After work, we headed to a bar near the station. It was a charming, cozy place with a warm atmosphere, centered around a counter. Ellie listened to me for a while, nodding, but when I told her about being berated by my wife and daughter and then sleeping in the hallway, she got angry on my behalf as if she were me. "What? They said that to you, and you slept in the hallway on a chair in this cold? That's just not right." With a thud, Ellie put her drink down on the counter. "Shh, keep it down, Ellie. It's embarrassing, so please don't tell anyone." I said this as I sipped my drink and enjoyed the snacks. I was busy in the lunch break, just nibbling on a convenience store snack in the sales car. I hadn't had a proper meal since yesterday, so the drink and snacks slowly seeped into my starving stomach. Moreover, having Ellie listen to me gradually loosened the tension in my heart. "No, I'm sorry, but that's emotional abuse. It's a valid reason for divorce." Emotional abuse? From a woman to a man? That can't be. It doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. It's just the heartless attacking the kind-hearted. How did it come to this? She used to be so cheerful and vibrant. Did I do something to hurt Susan? I remembered how adorable Susan was when we first started dating, and I was about to tear up, so I quickly changed the subject. "Oh, enough. You're too kind, Tom. Live your own life." Ellie slapped my arm with a sharp smack. "Ow, hey, Ellie, that hurts." She put down her drink and looked at me with a serious expression. "I'm sorry, but I just can't forgive it. After all, Tom, you work so hard every day for everyone. I want you to live your own life. This might sound sudden, and it's just a woman's intuition, but do you think your wife might be cheating on you?" I was so taken aback by her sudden question that I choked on my drink. "Hey, what are you suddenly suggesting? That's a bit much. My wife would never do something like that." "Wasn't your wife a popular team assistant of the baseball team? Always well-liked, and she's still making an effort to maintain her beauty. Just like in the past, right? Plus, she can't seem to help but show off on social media, and yet, she disregards a serious husband like you. Not to mention her dependency on your daughter and shopping. It's endless. I'm sorry to say this about your wife, but from an outsider's perspective, she seems very lonely. Where do you think such a person would seek affection? Where do you think she'd satisfy her need for female validation?" Ellie's gaze was intensely serious. I was at a loss for words. "Well, that's..." She pressed on. "Does your wife go out late at night by herself?" When she mentioned it, I did recall something. There were days when I came home to find no one there, assuming Susan and Cindy had gone out together. But at night, only Cindy would return alone. Susan would come back after I had fallen asleep, unnoticed by me. It might be presumptuous of me, but perhaps you should consider an investigation for infidelity. Maybe you're right. Acting on impulse, I immediately hired a detective agency near the office to investigate for infidelity. 2 weeks later, unfortunately, the investigation yielded results much more quickly and easily than expected. The results were conclusive: guilty. Not only on the days I worked overtime, but even during weekdays, Susan was seen gallivanting with various men and heading to hotels. It seems she met these unknown men through a dating app. Susan was a woman who could only affirm her value by being desired by others. Her immature behavior suggested that her emotional development might have stopped in her 20s. This made her seem like a child woman. She might even be competing with her young and attractive daughter, Cindy. It might appear to be going well on the surface. Susan might be filled with jealousy, but it's hard to say for sure. I didn't want to know. I thought to myself, I failed to protect my family. I continued to go to work without taking any days off. I maintained a smile during work, but the moment I was alone in the sales car, I couldn't stop crying. Tears blurred my vision, making it dangerous to drive, so I discreetly parked in a convenience store lot and cried until there were no tears left. In the evening, when I returned to the office, Ellie greeted me with a smile again. There's no way she wouldn't notice my eyelids and bloodshot eyes that were swollen from my tears. However, she looked at me quietly and pretended not to notice. The next spring arrived. It was a sunny day with the cherry blossoms in full bloom. It was also the day of Cindy's high school graduation. As usual, Susan and Cindy ignored me. Dressed in an excessively flashy uniform, Cindy and Susan, in a pink suit, left for the graduation ceremony without me. I watched them go. I decided to graduate from this family. Goodbye, Cindy, Susan, my dear family. There's so much I want to say, but now it's okay. Thank you for everything up to now. I've decided to leave this family. You've been telling me to leave, so you probably won't stop me now. Take care, I'm going to live my own life. When was the last time we had a meal together as a family? Feeling a bit sentimental, I left the several photos of Susan entering a hotel with a man on the living room table. Susan, having married right after graduating from university, had no work experience. There was no way she could support Cindy through college on her own, but they'd have to manage as a codependent mother-daughter duo. Later, I heard from an acquaintance at my former workplace that Cindy had dropped out of college and that she and Susan were living off part-time jobs. Their future must be uncertain and anxiety-inducing, but that was no longer my concern. Packing my few belongings into cardboard boxes to be shipped, I boarded a train bound for a new city. The sparsely populated train during a weekday afternoon was quite pleasant. I took a seat by a window with a beautiful view, opened a can of soda, and enjoyed a lunchbox. It was delicious. Cheers to me. The gods of fortune don't forsake those who work hard. Having achieved profitability on my own in a tough market, I was timely transferred to the headquarters in New York. The company even covered my moving expenses. And Ellie was coming along too. Our partnership remained strong at the New York headquarters. Freed from the shackles of Susan and Cindy, I was set to secure major contracts. After moving to New York, Ellie and I became good friends and developed a trusting relationship outside of work. While I took the lead at work with Ellie's support, in our private lives, it was the opposite. Ellie led the way in everything from outings to living arrangements to dining, and I was always there to support her. Enjoying this dynamic, I hoped it would last forever and proposed to her. Next year, we're expecting a daughter. This time, I'm determined to create a family filled with smiles. My dad worked really hard to raise me. That's why I've decided to support him until the end. My name is John. My mom passed away from an illness shortly after I was born, so I have no memories of her. But my dad often talked about her, which made me feel close to her. My dad, Mike, was a top salesperson at a food company and seemed to be on the fast track to success. However, to take care of me after losing my mom, it seems he gave up on advancing his career. He didn't leave me in the care of my grandparents and managed both work and taking care of me. He even made time to attend my school events, despite his busy schedule. Back then, it was rare for dads to be involved in school events, and I'd sometimes get teased by my friends. But no matter what anyone said, I was never embarrassed. I was so proud of my dad for caring about me and prioritizing spending time with me despite his busy work life. Thanks to him, I never felt lonely without a mom. I admired my dad and decided that I wanted to be like him someday. To support my dad, I started helping out with household chores. By the time I graduated from elementary school, I could handle most tasks on my own. When I started middle school, I also began a paper route job. Though my dad told me not to worry about money and to enjoy school, even as a kid, I could tell we were financially strained. I worked hard in my studies to avoid causing any worries, consistently ranking at the top of my class. Thanks to that, I was able to enter a well-known local prep school with a scholarship that covered my tuition. I wanted to ease my dad's burden as soon as possible, so I aimed to go to college and then work for a letting company. Studying was tough, but with my dad's support, I graduated from college and landed a job at my dream company this spring. When I entered college, my dad said, "John, you can live on your own if you want." I felt that living on my own would mean extra expenses for my dad, so I turned it down. Even after getting a job, I thought it better to save money and give it to my dad rather than spend it on living alone. Fortunately, my workplace was just a train ride away from home, so I decided to commute from there. I was assigned to the sales department of a housing company. I've always been interested in architecture and studied it in college as well. Starting the job, I realized what I had learned wasn't enough. I had to study materials and other aspects, visit clients, pitch new products, and prepare for events organized by the company. It was a hectic schedule. But I loved being involved in architecture and learning new things, which was very fulfilling. One weekend, I had to work on my day off for an event that included an open house for new properties organized by my company. When I returned home after the event, my dad was nowhere to be found. Laundry was half done, and dinner was half prepared. Everything was left midway as if my dad had just been there. There was a feeling that my dad had been around until just a moment ago, but something seemed off. Since I couldn't find my dad anywhere in the house, I decided to call his cell phone. It just kept ringing every time I called. Wait, the flip-flap on the balcony are missing. Realizing this, I decided to go out and look for him. I searched everywhere he might go: the supermarket, drugstore, bookstore, hardware store, but he was nowhere to be found. Then, my phone rang. "Hello, John, have you found Mike?" It was Nancy, my aunt, a relative living nearby. "No, I've been to all his usual spots, but he's not there. He hasn't come home yet either. Could you maybe wait a bit longer at home in case he comes back?" To avoid missing each other, I asked Nancy to stay home and wait for my dad's return. My phone rang again, and this time it displayed Mike. I quickly answered, "Hello." Then a calm voice said, "Is this John? I'm calling from the police station. Are you Mike's son?" "Yes, that's right. We have your dad here. He's saying he doesn't know how to get home. Could you please come to pick him up?" Upon being told, I headed to the police station as instructed. My dad looked extremely tired. When he saw me, he weakly said, John, is that you?" "John, I'm sorry. Come to think of it, I had been busy myself and hadn't paid much attention, but I had felt that something was off with my dad lately. He had been repeating the same dinner menu for several days and kept asking where his pen or nail clippers were. I thought it was just part of getting older and didn't think much of it. I was called to the police to complete the necessary procedures. While signing the documents, they asked me, "Does your father have any chronic illnesses?" I answered, "No, not really. You might want to consider the possibility of dementia. We recommend he consults a doctor," they suggested. I had thought it was too early for my dad to have dementia, and we had even joked about it a few years back. But this incident lingered in my mind. On the way home, wondering how to bring this up to my dad, he suddenly said, "Hey John, do you think I should go to the hospital?" "Yeah, I think it might be a good idea to get checked out," I managed to reply. The next day, since I was off from work, I accompanied my dad to the hospital. The diagnosis was early onset Alzheimer's. Both my dad and I were shocked by the result. The doctor and nurses explained the medication and treatment options, but honestly, it was hard to take it all in. After receiving some advice from the nurse, we decided to discuss what to do next together. My dad was considering taking a leave from work. Having seen my dad work all these years, I told him, maybe it's time to take it easy. You always said you'd like to relax. Don't worry, I'm managing my job well. Dad replied softly, really? It feels like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. After that, we consulted with the nurses and social workers to discuss the treatment plan. Since my dad is still young and physically healthy, we decided against attending a facility and opted to continue outpatient visits for medication. Home care became our main approach, marking the beginning of a new life for my dad and me. My dad's journey of recuperation began. Nothing much changed in our daily routine. I continued working and managing the household chores as before. I balanced work and household chores. This wasn't a significant burden since my dad and I had always cooperated on these tasks. My dad took his medication from the hospital and spent his days peacefully at home, enjoying the garden or immersing himself in his favorite books. However, when work became demanding, I sometimes had to start early in the morning or return home on the very last train. Therefore, I had Nancy, a neighbor, check on him during the day. To avoid burdening her every day, we asked for her help every few days. Nancy was always willing to help, which was a huge relief for me. One day, I managed to come home a bit earlier in the evening. As I entered saying, "I'm home," I bumped into Nancy. "I appreciate your help. Thank you so much," I said, expressing my gratitude. Nancy replied, "It's nothing. I brought a little food for dinner, so please have some," pointing to the table. She continued, "You're doing a great job balancing work and care. Being young, you must get invited out for drinks or have to entertain clients. That's all part of the job, but don't overdo it, and feel free to ask for help." With that, Nancy hurried back home. Just like Nancy mentioned, being in sales, I often had to entertain clients and attend drinking parties with my boss. In my department, there's an old-fashioned boss who prioritizes work over family. David has been the department head since I joined. Initially, I found him intimidating, but he's competent and well-respected by others. He was strict with me but also showed expectations, which motivated me to work hard. As I took my work seriously, David began to take an interest in me. He would take me along to greet our clients and have me work closely with him during events. Thanks to him, I quickly learned the ropes and became well regarded by our clients. David once shared his own upbringing and background with me. I was raised by my grandparents because my parents were divorced. So, when I heard about your situation, I felt it was similar. When you see your parents struggling, you become desperate not to end up the same way. I also worked hard to repay my grandparents as soon as I could. That's why I see my past self in you. David shared, indicating that he had faced hardships in his youth and saw a reflection of himself in me. That's probably why he was trying to help me become independent quickly through work. However, that was fine when my dad was healthy. Now that my dad is in need of care, I can't just focus on work. Lately, David has been inviting me to entertain clients more frequently than before. "You need to be able to handle client entertainment properly soon," he would say. "I'm worried about my dad, so I've stopped returning home on the last train as I used to. I try to finish my work within regular hours to get home earlier." David doesn't seem pleased with this. "Hey John, we're going out for drinks with President Miller of Miller Building Materials today, so we're coming too," he told me. "Sorry, I have to take care of my dad in the evening." When I tried to decline, he said, "What are you talking about? President Miller likes you and has been asking about you insistently." "Sorry, but I can't leave my dad alone." I apologize. When I refused, David got angry, saying, "What's wrong with you? Don't you have any motivation?" Despite this, I continued to work with David as before. But I was truly troubled because, despite repeatedly declining, I was still being asked to attend client entertainment events. "Hey John, you can handle the entertainment by now. Make it happen this time. It's for Thompson Industries, a company we owe a lot to. You've been there a few times, right? Your future work depends on this opportunity. You can make it, right?" David pressed with unusual intensity. Reluctantly, I agreed to attend the entertainment that evening. I asked Nancy to take care of my dad. Despite the short notice, Nancy agreed, saying, "It's okay. Your work is important, and you should take it seriously once in a while. Your dad will be fine." "This is an important entertainment evening," David emphasized. I greeted the people from Thompson Industries with all due respect. But I was anxious about my dad and couldn't wait for the event to end. David noticed my distraction and reprimanded me. "Hey, don't zone out. Focus." "Sorry, he seems a bit inexperienced. My apologies." Just when I was eager to leave, my phone rang. It was a call from Nancy, so I excused myself from the table to answer. "Hello, John. I'm in a bit of a bind. Mike seems restless. He's been pacing and now he's trying to go outside. It's troubling. He took his evening medication, but he's getting refer, and I'm worried." Nancy sounded anxious. Nancy, who always willingly helped, making such a call was unusual. I had a bad feeling that something wasn't right. Though nothing severe had happened yet, it seemed only a matter of time. The doctor had warned, even if the medication seems to calm him down, his condition can worsen suddenly. Be especially vigilant if anything seems off. I informed David that I needed to leave due to my dad's condition. He responded angrily, "Enough with the excuses. This is work. Be serious. Do you even care?" Then my phone rang again. "John, your dad seems really unsettled with just me here. I'm sorry, but could you come back early?" Nancy asked urgently. Feeling the situation was dire, I told David I had to leave, and without waiting for a response, I rushed out. Upon my return, my dad seemed somewhat calm at the sight of me. "John, you're back. Good. I'm feeling unwell, so I might lie down. Nancy was here helping around the house, so maybe give her a thank you call later," he said before heading to the bedroom. Seemingly forgetting Nancy was still nearby. I thanked Nancy for staying by my dad's side. "I'm sorry for the sudden request. It must have been tough. I really appreciate it." "It's okay. I'm just sorry I couldn't be more helpful. And John, don't push yourself too hard," Nancy kindly advised, also showing concern for me. The next day, I went to work feeling guilty for leaving the entertainment early and causing inconvenience to David. Upon arriving at work, I first went to apologize to David, who responded with a laugh and a pat on my shoulder, saying, "It was really a mess. I had to take charge and get through it somehow. You owe me one for this." Feeling guilty already, I was all the more grateful for David's usual cheerful demeanor. Determined to make it up for my work, I immersed myself even more in my job while managing household tasks and caring for my dad. A week later, David said, "Hey John, there's an entertainment event with Thompson Industries tonight. The others are tied up with different tasks, so it's up to you. You owe me for last time, so you can make it tonight, right?" I planned to work hard during office hours, but the thought of attending another evening event felt impossible. "David, I'm sorry, but due to family circumstances, I can't make it to the entertainment. My apologies." "Don't joke around. Get ready quickly." David dismissed my concerns. I tried to explain seriously again. "David, I really can attend evening events. I'll work hard during office hours." Then he retorted, "How long are you going to play the special card? If you're getting paid, you should do your job properly. What's the big deal about an entertainment event? You're really useless." Seemingly annoyed with me, I avoided interacting much with David for the rest of the day. The next day, David stopped giving me work assignments. Not only that, but I was also excluded from departmental information and projects I had been involved in. When I tried to get work from others, they all said, "You have to check with David." When I asked David for instructions, he said, "There's nothing you can do. Find something else to work on." I was not only deprived of work, but also assigned unnecessary tasks, field work, and even complaint handling for departments I wasn't part of. Days went by without being allowed to do any of the work I had been doing since joining the company. I was swamped with handling complaints that day. While I was working, a thick file was abruptly placed on my desk. David casually said, "Hey, you must be free. Summarize this document and digitize it or something." "No, but I'm dealing with a complaint right now." I tried to refuse, but David retorted, "What? Can't even do what you're told properly. Must be nice, getting paid, leaving on time, and all that. Really enviable. Everyone else is working overtime, trying hard, you know." As he looked around, no one met his gaze. "If you can't handle this, you're useless to this company. Might as well quit," David said with a laugh, and something inside me snapped. I found myself saying, "Yes, you're right. I'm not allowed to do real work, and I'm subjected to what seems like harassment. The work environment is toxic. I might as well quit before I get sick. I don't need any leave or anything. I resign effective today. Thank you for everything." And with that, I submitted my resignation and left. I quit my job on impulse, but honestly, I have no regrets. I've worked hard up to now and haven't lived a lavish lifestyle. As long as I keep living the way I have been, I won't face any difficulties for the time being. That's how I felt. I decided to focus on spending time with my dad. We didn't do anything special, just enjoyed peaceful days at home where I was raised. We'd take walks to the hospital, reminisce while organizing the house, and had fulfilling times I couldn't have imagined while being busy with work. Although I wasn't struggling financially, I knew I couldn't stay home forever. I guess it's about time I start working again. Just as I was thinking this, while cleaning the entrance, a luxury car pulled up in front of my house. The man who got out of the car said politely, "Hello, it's been a while." I was trying to remember who he was, and then it hit me. It was Chairman Michael Thompson of Thompson Industries, whom I had met at a reception I had left early. Uncertain why the chairman came to my house, I invited him in, feeling it rude to chat outside. "Sorry for the sudden visit. Oh, Mike, you're looking well. Do you remember me?" Mr. Thompson started talking to my dad as soon as he entered. Then, my father's face brightened up instantly, and he said cheerfully, "Oh, Michael, it's you. How have you been?" As they talked happily for the first time in a while. Apparently, Chairman Thompson and my father have been friends since their college days. Thompson Industries, now widely expanding its business, apparently faced many challenges in the beginning. During tough times when the food and beverage sector was not doing well and the company needed to downsize, my father was there to advise Chairman Thompson. Relying on the connections my father had built through his work, Thompson Industries managed to make a remarkable turnaround and grow significantly. Not just in business matters, but when Chairman Thompson himself was in dire straits and struggling to make ends meet, he would often come over to our house for meals. While talking, Chairman Thompson paid his respects at the family altar where my mother's photograph was placed, looking nostalgic about those days. "I never expected to meet your son, John, at the dinner. I've been worried about you since then. There was another dinner shortly after, but you weren't there. I was looking forward to talking more about your dad, so it was a shame," Mr. Thompson expressed. "I'm truly sorry for that time. As you might know, my dad is currently recuperating at home. I'm taking care of him and handling household chores," I said apologetically. Mr. Thompson responded, "Jess, I've heard. You're doing great for someone so young. Your boss mentioned you were neglecting work because of home responsibilities. But I don't think so. You've been working hard." Hearing this made me feel that my efforts were recognized. If you're willing, would you consider joining my company? President Anderson also spoke highly of you at the dinner. We won't force you to come to the office. We can discuss the terms later, but I believe our company needs you, Mr. Thompson kindly offered. Grateful for Chairman Thompson's generous offer, I immediately responded on the spot, yes, please, I'd appreciate that. Subsequently, I started working at Thompson Industries. I work at the office a few days a week and spend the other days working from home. Of course, I'm also taking advantage of the company's policies. Although I'm working fewer hours than before, I'm blessed with a great team and a supportive environment at the company. I'm determined to work hard without taking this environment for granted, while also valuing the time spent with my father. You don't belong here, you poor wretch. Take your raggedy kid and scram. Just because he's wearing mud-stained clothes doesn't mean it's okay to tell an innocent boy to disappear. Telling me to leave, even though I was invited to the wedding, is unacceptable, even for the heir to a major corporation. But then again, my elite classmate James has always been selfish like that. I'm Michael. I was born into a poor family, but I've never been ashamed of it. We were poor because my mother was frail. My father couldn't become a full-time employee because he had to care for her. He could only work part-time because we never knew when her condition might worsen. So, our monthly income was unstable, and I had to support the family by delivering newspapers since elementary school. Being poor has taught me what's truly important in life. After all, my father always used to say to me, "Listen, Michael, never live a life you can't be proud of. If you see someone in trouble, help them out." My father was a man of few words, but his teaching still lives in my heart. I learned that there are people who live contrary to my father's teachings when I was in the 3rd grade. James, who transferred from a neighboring elementary school, was the kind of person who would bully anyone he deemed inferior. The Anderson family has been wealthy for generations, and James's father is a corporate president. James is the president's son. There was no one in the class wealthier than James. To him, everyone in the class was beneath him. So, within a month of transferring, he had bullied and dominated the entire class. Raised on my father's teachings, I couldn't stand James bullying my classmates and always stepped in to help. What's with you? The poorest kid in class, defying me. Being poor has nothing to do with it. Bullying the weak is cowardly. Idiot. The world runs on money. Money is everything. I was grabbed by the collar, slapped across the face, and left with a nosebleed. Seeing this, the entire class was terrified, and thereafter, everyone became subservient to James. By defying James, I became isolated in the class and the target of bullying. Since everyone else would be treated harshly by James if they didn't exclude me, the whole class turned their backs on me. Most of the class went on to the same junior high school, so the bullying continued there. At that time, my father was working in a factory owned by James's father, so even when James harassed me, I had to endure in silence. If I resisted, my father could lose his job. Being poor, my mother also hesitated to go to the hospital. Thus, her condition would improve and then worsen again, leading to repeated hospitalizations. Not wanting to burden my father further, I decided to give up going to high school and started working after junior high. With the economy in a slump, it was hard to find a company willing to hire someone with just a junior high school education. Maybe I could have squeezed in if my grades were better, but I often skipped classes because I hated being harassed by James. "Michael, if I ask my dad, I can get you a job at a top company. In return, lick my shoes." I was desperate for a job, and James shoved his sneakers in my face. They were muddy, but I knelt down. "Not just lick, lap it up." I brought my face close to the sneakers. "Look, everyone, poor people will even lick dirty shoes for money." At that moment, my father's words came back to me. Remember, Michael, never live a life you can't be proud of, as James thrust his dirty sneakers in front of me. James pushing those muddy sneakers in my face brought me to tears. James's sneer and foul breath washed over me. The next moment, I grabbed James's ankle and twisted. Caught off guard, James fell headfirst to the floor, crying out in pain. Seeing my ridiculous situation, my classmates struggled to hold back their laughter, but they looked at me with respect. Due to James's interference, I couldn't find a job locally and ended up working at a small supermarket in the countryside. At first, my job was just unloading goods from trucks, stocking shelves, and cleaning the vast parking lot, all kinds of menial tasks. After a year of hard work, the owner recognized my efforts and promoted me to be in charge of purchasing. While cleaning the store and parking lot, I would listen to customers' conversations, gathering information on what products were popular and in demand. When I shared this information during purchasing meetings, the owner was impressed. "Michael, were you conducting your own marketing research? I'm embarrassed to have underestimated you because you dropped out of middle school." I didn't know anything about marketing, but being praised by the owner felt great. Thanks to the information I provided, the supermarket expanded its product range, attracting more customers and increasing sales. By the age of 23, I had been promoted to supervisor and took an active role in managing the supermarket's operations. It was a big promotion for someone who only finished middle school, but I believe it was thanks to 8 years of diligent effort. Right before the plan to open a second store and make me the manager was announced, the owner died suddenly of a heart attack, turning my life upside down. The owner's wife ended up selling the supermarket's management rights to a newly arrived company. Moreover, that company was part of the conglomerate led by James's father. I was one of the first to be laid off, probably because James found out about me and sabotaged me behind the scenes. How much more will my life be plagued by James's harassment? I lost all motivation to work. I decided to go back home for a while and rethink my future. By then, my mother's illness had improved, and my father was working as a full-time employee. So, I was able to return home with peace of mind. After a while back home, my mother said, "Michael, there's a wedding invitation for you." The sender was James Anderson. Seriously, why would he send me an invitation? As I was about to tear it up in frustration, my father said sternly, "No matter how much you dislike someone, they've taken the trouble to send an invitation. It's only right to celebrate their happiness." "You're right, sorry, he was a classmate, after all. I'll celebrate for him." Although I agreed with my father, it was just so typical of James. Apparently, James had sent wedding invitations to all his former classmates. He probably wanted to gather his old classmates to assert his authority once again. Even after more than 8 years since graduating middle school, he still longs for those days. I couldn't help but pity James. On the wedding day, I left home with the gift money in my pocket. Although it was raining in the morning, by the time I left, the weather had cleared up, making it a perfect day for a wedding. As I neared the venue, I noticed a boy around 10 years old, wearing mud-stained clothes, looking like he was about to cry. Seeing someone in trouble, I couldn't just walk by. I asked the boy, "Your clothes are all muddy. What happened?" "I fell in a puddle. I want to go to the wedding hall, but I'm lost." "That works out. Let's go together." Since we were heading to the same place, I took the boy with me to the wedding venue. According to the boy, he was supposed to attend the wedding with his grandfather, but got separated while seeking shelter from the rain. "Are you going to the wedding too?" "Yeah, are you too? It's a big venue, and today is an auspicious day, so there are likely many weddings happening. Once we get there, I'll help you find your grandfather." "Thank you." Such a well-mannered boy. Despite his muddy clothes, his responses indicated good upbringing. Arriving at the wedding venue, I was surprised. I had assumed there would be several weddings ongoing, But the Anderson family had rented out the entire venue. Typical of the son of a major corporation's president, I thought, but it made sense since he had sent invitations to all his classmates. He wanted to throw a grand wedding, renting out the entire venue to showcase his status. At the entrance, there was a long line for the gift registry. Thinking of finding the boy's grandfather first, I started climbing the hall staircase. "Hey, what's with the kid?" James, dressed in a crisp white tuxedo, blocked our way. I was actually looking for this child's grandfather, but before I could explain, James started berating us without listening. Sending an invitation to a poor guy like you was a mistake, bringing such a filthy brat along too. Hold on, there's a reason for this. People like you don't belong here. Take your raggedy kid and beat it. After being verbally abused, the boy started to cry. Not wanting to subject him to more humiliation, I decided to take the boy's hand and head back downstairs. That's when a man rushed over and suddenly began to deeply apologize to the boy. While I was taken aback, the man turned out to be James's father, apologizing to the boy. "My son has committed unforgivable rudeness. Please accept my sincerest apologies. Please." The man who deeply apologized was James's father, Mr. Anderson. He is the president of a major company. It was surprising to see such an important figure apologizing to a young boy. James seemed confused to see his father apologizing to a dirty child. Then, a white-haired elderly man appeared, calling out to the boy, "Brian, where have you been? I've been looking everywhere for you." "Grandpa." The boy ran to the old man and hugged him. James's father, upon seeing the old man, hurriedly stood up and greeted him respectfully. "Mr. Thompson, thank you very much for attending my son's wedding." The elderly man called Mr. Thompson was the chairman of the parent company of the corporation run by James's father. James had told the chairman's grandson to get lost with his tattered clothes. That's why James's father apologized so profusely. Realizing the gravity of the situation, James turned pale as he saw his father apologize deeply to Chairman Thompson. Chairman Thompson said to James's father, "What kind of education have you given your son? I'm terribly sorry for the disrespect shown to your grandson. How can I possibly make amends? I'm displeased. I came here to celebrate upon receiving an invitation, but I'm leaving now." With a scowl, Chairman Thompson glared at James, took the boy by the shoulder, and left the wedding hall. The wedding went on, but James and his father looked gloomy and downcast throughout, like they were at a wake. Rumors later circulated that James was disowned by his father and fired from the company. Having been arrogant under the protection of his corporate heir status, James was now humbly job hunting after losing his backing. When I coincidentally saw James in a park, he looked exhausted, sitting on a bench, eating a gas station sandwich. Remembering my father's teaching, if you see someone in trouble, help them, I offered James some encouragement. "I know how hard job hunting can be, James. Let's both keep our spirits up." "Michael, even after all I did to you, why are you?" "I'm sorry, forgive me." James's voice broke into tears, unable to finish his sentence. Despite everything, I sincerely hoped James would find happiness in his lowest moments. The boy, who had been lost in muddy clothes, apparently told Chairman Thompson about me helping him. Eventually, I was invited to Chairman Thompson's house and received immense gratitude. Knowing I was job hunting, Chairman Thompson offered me a position in his company. Now, I'm working hard and thriving. Since this is a company where skills matter more than educational background, I truly enjoy my work. Thanks to this, I've been promoted to supervisor and even have a fiancé now. I'm most grateful to my father. Following his childhood advice, never live a life you can't be proud of. If you see someone in trouble, help them. I vowed to continue living earnestly and diligently. Hey, poor guy, go around pouring drinks for everyone. At a mixer I was invited to by an old friend. One of the male attendees said this to me. He had always looked down on me, even from the past. It seems nothing has changed even now that we're adults. This guy's family is super poor. Didn't you drop out of college too? Tough being poor, huh? He pointed at me and snickered. However, the atmosphere at the mixer was terrible, and he was the only one laughing. Well, I'm used to being made fun of, so it doesn't really bother me. At that moment, one of the women seemed to notice something and exclaimed, "Little did I know that it would bring such despair to the one who looked down on me. My name is Nathan. I'm just an ordinary guy with a domestic ID job. I have contracts with quite a few companies, so my work is pretty busy. There are days when I can't take a break, depending on the situation. But I enjoy my work, so I don't mind. Sometimes people around me worry, but my daily life is fulfilling. So, what do you say? It's been a while." One day, I got a message from an old friend. His name is George. Not sure if he's a best friend or a bad influence. Let's just say we have a complicated relationship. Anyway, that's the kind of guy he is. George and I have been close since kindergarten and went to the same high school. The most memorable times were during elementary school. "So, what are we doing today?" I asked George. There was an action game that was all the rage when we were in elementary school. Both of us begged our parents to buy it, and we'd gather at each other's houses nearly every day to play together. Nowadays, you can play online with the internet, but I also enjoyed the feeling of having to gather together back then. I asked him because I wanted to invite him to play that game. Of course, we're playing. My parents are out today, so I can't leave the house. "Got it, then I'll come over to your place." There were many others in our class who played the same game, but it was always just the two of us. There are two main reasons for this. One is the nature of the game. It allows up to 4 players to play simultaneously, but that makes the game too easy. If everyone is using trap items and deceiving each other, it's just not fun anymore. But it's too difficult to play alone, so 2 players is just right. The other reason is simply that we didn't have many friends. George was not so, but I was terribly shy. He knew that and didn't try to invite other people forcibly. The enemy's down. At George's cue, I moved my character towards the head of the quadruped enemy that had fallen. "All right, let's go." Together with my best friend, we wielded a type of weapon that uses 2 swords, pressing the attack. We mashed the buttons furiously, to the point where it seemed like the video console might break. Then, as we did so, the message that we had defeated the enemy appeared, and the enemy fell. We had struggled until now, never able to defeat this enemy. But at last, the 2 of us had managed to take it down. We did it, Nathan. Overwhelmed with excitement, we put down the game console and jumped around joyfully. We high-fived, celebrating each other's hard work. In hindsight, it was fortunate that George's parents weren't home. If they were, we would have definitely been scolded for being too loud. Let's brag about it to the others. By the others, George meant our classmates who played the same game. Although we didn't have many friends, it wasn't uncommon for us to talk about games during breaks. From what I heard, no one else had managed to defeat this enemy at the time. We said it becomes too easy with 4 players, but this enemy was an exception. We were the first in our class to defeat such a monster. Let's do it. I thought this might give me the courage to make more friends to play with. I was thinking along those lines. Well, in the end, things didn't go as smoothly as I had hoped, and we ended up graduating from elementary school. The next period I remember well is high school, which is relatively fresh to my memory. We went to the same high school. We opted for a special advancement class aimed at university admission, so we didn't have class changes and were together for 4 years. Even though we were aiming for college, I wanted to join some kind of club. I was wondering what to do. That's when my old friend came to talk to me. "Nathan, have you decided on a club yet?" "Not yet. I'm wondering what to do. Sports clubs aren't really my thing." "Then how about we try the astronomy club? You like stargazing, right? It's still the provisional membership period, so why not give it a try?" "The astronomy club, huh?" I don't have much knowledge about astronomy, but I do like looking at the stars. Being shy and not having many friends, I often find myself troubled. But looking up at the vast sky makes all those worries seem insignificant. Yeah, maybe I'll give it a try. Great, if that's settled, let's go today after the supplementary lessons. Don't just disappear on me, okay? You always vanish before I notice. In the advanced class, there is one more session after the 6th period. This time is dedicated to college entrance exam preparation, which is beyond the scope of regular classes. It's essentially a 7th period. Okay, got it. My passion for gaming hasn't changed since elementary school, and I'm still deeply into it. As I've mentioned, having few friends, I have plenty of time to devote to gaming. I recently splurged on a computer with the money I had been saving up. Initially, I bought it to play games, but I've started to enjoy tinkering with the computer itself. I've started learning various things and having fun, becoming the kind of person George joked about who rushes straight home. So, from our perspective here on Earth, it appears in different colors when it's moving away from us and when it's coming closer. You know how the sound of an ambulance changes as it passes by. It's the same principle. Whether the astronomy club can do any activities depends on the weather. Today, unfortunately, it was cloudy, and the most we could see were the moon and maybe some first magnitude stars. So the astronomy club's activities shifted from stargazing to a lecture by Mr. White from the Earth Science Department. Here we go. Just finished a class, and now this. I thought it was a bit too much to start with a lecture during the provisional membership, but it turned out to be very interesting. Before I knew it, I was participating alongside the senior club members. Meanwhile, George was dozing off in a corner. That guy, inviting me and then dozing off himself. That's it for today. To the two of you who are here for provisional membership, thank you for coming. If you liked it, I can give you the forms for official membership. What do you think? Asked by Mr. White. We exchanged looks. George nodded with a faint smile. I was also pleased to hear interesting stories like today's. It seems there's a summer camp where we stay at an observatory in the mountains. My best friend must have sensed how I felt about it. Yes, I'd love to join. From that day, George and I were members of the astronomy club for 4 years. I had to sacrifice some of my computer tinkering time, but I'm grateful for the fulfilling experiences his invitation brought. George, who seemed to have joined the astronomy club for my sake, eagerly ran for president of the club. Seeing him then, I realized he hadn't given up his own fun just because of me. George always had a way of pulling me up, despite my reserved nature. However, there were some concerns. George is sociable and lively. However, he is also impulsive and tends to get carried away. I often found myself playing the role of his stopper. Despite our contrasting personalities, we've shared more than a decade in this inexplicable relationship. Eventually, the time came for us to part ways. Even though we'd been together from preschool to high school, our university choices differed. George stayed at a local university, while I went to one in New York. A little after our high school graduation, on the day I was moving to New York, we dusted off that game we used to play back in elementary school after a long time. Looking back, the graphics were so rough. The controls were poor compared to the latest games, and the sounds and motions were heavily recycled. But that inconvenience revived our memories. Hey, what are you crying for, Nathan? Sorry. Enemies that once gave us trouble were no match for us now, grown as we were. The joy of growth felt oddly lonely. Keep at it in New York, Nathan. Yeah. Don't worry too much, we've got phones, so we can always stay in touch. That's true, but still. The sadness of not being able to talk face to face for a while was there, but I also harbored a vague fear. The fear of suddenly being alone after always being led by him. The fear of living in an unfamiliar place. And countless other anxieties I couldn't quite grasp. It was a jumble of feelings. Surely, it was also linked to a lack of confidence in myself. Don't worry, it's impossible for us to become distant. Seeing the anxious look on my face, George said that to me. Feeling as though he had seen right through me, I felt a bit embarrassed inside. Thanks, George. After expressing my gratitude, he sent me off with a carefree laugh. Then I started my life in New York and eventually became a working adult. We talked on the phone occasionally, but the last time we met in person was on the day I moved. How many years has it been? Busy schedules kept us from finding time, and it had been quite a while. Then, out of the blue, I received a text from him asking to meet. Of course, when's good for you? I can make it back there around the weekend after next this month. He replied immediately. I'm a bit swamped this month. How about early next month? That should work. And so, we moved the conversation forward, adjusting our schedules. In the end, we promised to go for drinks in the beginning of next month. George seemed really excited, and he had already booked a place the day after we decided on the date. He's not a kid anymore. Despite thinking that, I too looked forward to the day and worked hard. On the day of the catch-up with George, I finished work early and rushed back to my hometown. Since I was coming straight from work, I was dressed rather formally in a suit and such. This attire was hardly suitable for a reunion with a friend. So, I decided to stop by my parents' house to change. Ah, there he is. Hey, over here, Nathan. When I arrived at the designated place, George was there, waving at me enthusiastically. His bright demeanor hadn't changed a bit from back then. Long time no see, George. Yeah, it's been a while. Man, you've gotten quite impressive, haven't you? Where exactly do you see impressive in this? Jeans and a navy hoodie. I had taken out my contact and was wearing black framed glasses instead. If anything, the only somewhat notable item was my watch, but it certainly wasn't anything to be called impressive. Well, shall we go inside for now? Yeah, let's do that. Just as George urged me and we were about to enter the reserved place. You guys, isn't that Nathan and George? A voice, overly robust and rough in its language, called out from behind us. Turning around, I saw a man whose appearance matched the gruff voice perfectly. It was Ryan, a classmate from high school. Likely just off work, he was in a suit. Well, Ryan. What do you mean, well, George? After all this time we finally meet and that's what you say. George's wow wasn't at ease. It was the kind of reaction one has when they really didn't want to meet someone. Because Ryan was our arch nemesis during high school. You guys still hanging out? Nothing's changed. Ryan, who annoyingly tried to throw an arm around our shoulders. It was utterly bothersome, but lacking the guts to retaliate, I just gave a forced smile. What, just the two of you guys having a drink? Yeah, well, something like that. I tried to make my disinterest obvious, but Ryan seemed completely unfazed. He's always been like this, never really considering others. In that respect, he hasn't changed a bit, just like us. But man, Nathan, what's with that outfit? I'd be embarrassed to walk outside in that. Even your watch is lame. You've got no style. Ryan, invading personal space and laughing boisterously. I've always found his approach, so different from George's, difficult to handle. While we were dawdling at the entrance because of this, another voice called out from behind. This time, it was a calm, elegant, yet lively female voice. George. Reacting to the voice calling George, I also turned around. The owner of the voice was an energetic-looking woman, with another woman on each side of her. Do we know them? I wondered. With that question in mind, I looked at George, who confessed in a whisper, audible only to me. Actually, I thought I'd set up the mixer for you, since you don't have a girlfriend. But George's consideration was in vain, as Ryan overheard him. A mixer. Looks like we're short on guys. Can't be helped, I'll join in too, that's cool, right? With a voice that seemed more agreeable than his earlier demeanor, Ryan asked the two women for permission. Frustratingly, he is handsome and well-dressed. The woman in the middle exchanged looks with the other two and replied, of course. This is going to be troublesome, I thought, watching the group enter the restaurant. Ryan led the way, followed by the two women. Left outside were George, me, and the woman who seemed to be organizing the event on their side. My name is Mia. I look forward to spending time with you today, she said. She was an old acquaintance of George and was invited today because of that connection. Her silky long black hair was attractive, and her refined gestures were memorable. She was astonishingly beautiful, with a slender figure. Suddenly greeted by such a person, I was flustered. I'm Nathan. Nice to meet you. When I introduced myself, Mia's eyes widened slightly. Wondering what that meant, I hesitated to ask while gauging her expression. Seeing me like this, George was grinning. Let's head inside, shall we? Yeah, let's do that. Encouraged by Mia, the three of us headed inside. Once seated, we started with introductions. I'm Mia, a senior in college. Still a student, but please be kind to me. I was surprised by her introduction. A college student with such composure and grace. Truly surprising. Following her, the other two women introduced themselves. The person in the middle was a lively woman with a short haircut. She was the woman who had called out to George in front of the restaurant. The other was a petite woman with light brown bobbed hair. They were all classmates from the same university. All three had job offers and were just finishing their thesis papers. The conversation warmed up a bit with talk about university. Despite being completely different types, they seemed to get along very well. Now it's your turn. Me, really? Suddenly singled out by George, I got flustered again. The tension had been continuous. I'm Nathan. Nice to meet you. After my mumbled introduction, Ryan burst out laughing before saying, You're too gloomy. He probably thought it was a comedic jab, but his voice was too loud. Does he not realize this is a public place? I'm Ryan. Might not look it, but I graduated from a state university. Now I work in IT. Planning to start my own business eventually. Nice to meet you all. He was putting on the same act in front of the women as before, making me want to say, who are you trying to impress? Last up is me, George. After university, I took over the family business and am self-employed. Actually, we are high school classmates. After the men's introductions, the first round of drinks we ordered arrived. George, the organizer on our side, said a few words and we all toasted. Even then, I was still nervous. As the food arrived, the conversation grew more lively. The thing is, Mia is really beautiful, right? So we kept telling her to go for it, and we got her to participate in the university's beauty pageant. The woman with the short haircut spoke brightly about Mia. Mia herself did not interrupt the story but sat quietly, looking embarrassed. And then, surprise, she made it quite far in the competition. That's impressive. Perhaps due to the alcohol, Ryan's voice was louder than before. It seems he has given up on pretending to be someone he's not. Even though we were in a private room, I was concerned about the noise, wishing Ryan would lower his voice, but he seemed not to care at all. That's why Mia is our pride. Please, stop it already. Mia finally spoke up, still looking embarrassed. Gradually, she began to share her own stories. The girl on this side is great at studying and has really good grades. And the one here is skilled at cooking and always brings delicious homemade lunches. The women praised each other wholeheartedly. Their bond didn't seem fabricated at all. It was clear they truly had a strong friendship, which was admirable. This restaurant is part of a chain known by a luxury cuisine and is known for its delicious food. I had researched in advance and knew it wasn't the kind of place two guys would typically go to. George likes Western food, so it was an unusual choice for him, and I had wondered about it. Little did I know it was for a mixer. If only he had told me in advance, I would have dressed better. Only the best students, including myself, went to the state university. I, being shy, was enjoying the food on my own. Contrary to me, Ryan was smoothly chatting with the women. His conversation was awful, filled with nothing but boasts about his academic credentials, the brands he wore, and how much his possessions cost. That's why I'm trusted and respected by my superiors at work. Haha, is that so? From their tone, it seemed the women might be getting fed up. Looking at their faces confirmed it. All three appeared strained. No surprise there. It takes a lot to make the cheerful girls sound so subdued, and to make the graceful Mia look uncomfortable. Come on, Nathan, you need to say something to change the atmosphere. George, sitting next to me, nudged me with his elbow and whispered. Focused on my food, I hadn't really been following the conversation. As I pondered what to do, I came to the conclusion, maybe this is actually okay. The point was to interrupt Ryan's bragging, so the more I ignored the current conversation, the better. This is really good. Hesitant to raise my voice like Ryan, I spoke to Mia, who was sitting across from me. It was creamy veal stew with veal stock, sweetbreads, and shavings of black truffle. Everything I'd eaten was delicious, but this stew was exceptional. Hey, Nathan, what are you doing recommending such a high-calorie dish to a lady? What kind of sense do you have? Ryan noticed my attempt to engage Mia and immediately jumped in. Internally, I retorted that at least I wasn't the one bragging about myself at a mixer. It's really delicious. I was slightly regretting my choice, considering Ryan's comment, but Mia didn't hesitate to try the stew and shared her thoughts. Everyone should try it too. We shouldn't let this wonderful food go cold. Thanks to Mia expanding the conversation to include the other women, the focus shifted entirely to the food. The atmosphere was no longer dominated by Ryan's boasting. Suddenly, Mia and I made eye contact. Without anyone noticing, she smiled at me. With my limited social interactions, I couldn't quite grasp the intention behind her smile. Wow, this shrimp is great. Here, Nathan, try some. The women, who hadn't touched their food for a while, were now engrossed in it. They even offered me some. Yeah, thank you. I leaned forward, reaching out to take a few pieces. At that moment, I felt Ryan's gaze on me, filled with what seemed like hatred. After a while, when everyone started to put down their forks, Ryan glanced around briefly before turning to me and saying loudly, "Hey, poor guy, go around and pour drinks for everyone." His sudden outburst drew everyone's gaze to him. This guy's family is super poor, and he dropped out of college, right? Tough being poor. He started laughing uproariously at his own insult. However, he was the only one laughing. The women were all visibly put off. "Hey Nathan, what are you even doing now? You're jobless since you didn't go to college, right?" He continued to mock with his baseless assumptions, laughing again. As I was shaking my head in disbelief, George suddenly stood up. It was clear he had reached his limit. Enough already. Typical George. George has always been impulsive. However, he never gets angry over matters concerning himself. He gets angry when someone mocks his friends, family, or loved ones. It's one of his endearing qualities. "Come on, George, it's okay, really." I managed to get him to sit down again and pass the menu to the women. Maybe some of you prefer something other than beer. Order whatever you like. I want something sweet too. George, you should order something as well. I tried to divert the topic. Ryan, not pleased with being ignored, shouted again. Hey, don't ignore me, you poor thing. He seemed ready to lash out, moving past George towards me. That's when it happened. I'd finally remembered. The woman with the short haircut, sitting in the middle, exclaimed. Mr. Isaac, you're Mr. Isaac, the CEO of the major IT company Rockstraight. I've been offered a position, and I'll be under your care next year. Oh Nathan, you've been caught. George said, laughing. This wasn't a laughing matter. The CEO of a company was sitting here in casual attire, at a drinking party. Being ridiculed by a high school classmate about my educational background. Where was the humor in that? I didn't recognize you because you were dressed so casually, different from the photos. My apologies. No worries, it's a personal gathering today, and I wasn't informed there would be ladies here, so sorry about that. I replied, giving George a slight glare. Haha, my bad. Ryan stood silent, watching our exchange. Meanwhile, the women, especially the one with the short haircut, were thrilled. The photo on the website is really cool, look. Let's not do this. I tried to stop her, but it was too late. The photo of me displayed on her cell phone had already caught the other's attention. It was a photo of me with neatly styled hair, without glasses, wearing a suit. Furthermore, an unusually large image was used for the CEO introduction. No matter how many times I see it, it still looks like someone else, George remarked, laughing casually as he looked at her phone. Really, he's incredibly handsome. You look cool, Nathan. Even Mia. After that, the women continued to make a fuss about me for a while. You must be popular, right? They asked, but that's far from the truth. The real me is like this, and besides, I'm too busy to hang out with people these days. Even attending today's gathering was a stretch with my limited schedule. Look at you, Nathan, all popular, George teased. Well, hardly, I replied, embarrassed by the attention from the women, something I had never experienced before. To cover my embarrassment, I kept sipping my drink. When the atmosphere finally calmed down, the woman with the short haircut said softly, "You could have just told us you were the CEO." Her voice was gentle, perhaps due to being slightly tipsy. As I was wondering how to respond, Ryan, who seemed to have completely sobered up, raised his voice again. "Don't be fooled, ladies. There's no way this guy is a CEO. He's always been poor and dresses so badly." He repeated his insults without learning his lesson. The women's gazes were cold. They even seemed a bit angry. "Hey, Ryan," George said, his voice gentle yet firm, a stark contrast to his earlier demeanor. "He has had his own struggles. If you mock him for that, I won't stand for it." Ryan became quiet under the quiet pressure, his face blank in astonishment. It was hard to believe this was the same man who had been ranting so loudly, now looking so pitiful. My parents divorced when I was a baby. I was raised by my mother, who decided to return to our hometown, where I met George in daycare. Our homes were close by, and our parents got along well. As a result, we became one-of-a-kind best friends. We always hung out after school and joined the same club in high school. Unlike the energetic George, I am more of an indoor person. It's a strange bond that two such opposite individuals are best friends. When it was time to go to college, I bravely contacted my father in New York. Since he said, "If you're going to live here, I'll take care of you," I consulted with my mother and decided to leave my hometown. By then, I was already fascinated by computers and programming. Programming was so fascinating that I worried about balancing it with my studies, but having managed to pass the university entrance exams, I assumed everything would be fine. However, things were not so easy. I barely managed my course credits, didn't join any clubs or circles, and devoted all my time to programming. I didn't do part-time jobs but took on programming project to earn money. This led to success, and I started my own company in my second year of university. The company grew rapidly, making it difficult to juggle both school and work. And that's the story. I want to focus on my company. I feel bad in spite of you supporting me all this way, but I've decided to drop out of college. When I explained this to my father, he was surprised and took a moment to think. I feared he wouldn't approve, but his response was unexpected. I've caused you trouble because of the situation with your mother and me. You've had it tough being raised by a single parent. I can play the parent card now and crush your dreams. If you have something you want to do, I'll support you, he said. That was his answer. It was an answer I hadn't anticipated, and I almost felt like crying. My dad talked to my mom about it, so I was able to choose my own path. And so, after dropping out of college, Nathan expanded his company to what it is today. George spoke about my past to Ryan in my stead, as I remained silent. Feeling a bit emboldened, I decided to chime in as well. I was raised in a single-parent household, but I did receive child support. I can accept being called unfashionable, but being baselessly labeled as poor is somewhat troubling. Ryan, faced with comments from both of us, turned bright red and twisted his face. Yet, it seemed he still had more to say and opened his mouth once more. Still, the fact remains that you're dressed unfashionably right now. To think he would say such a thing. His words seemed completely disjointed, as if he hadn't listened to a word I said. Seeing no hope, I sighed in exasperation. What was the name of the IT company you work for, Ryan? What does that have to do with anything right now? Just tell me, are you too embarrassed to say it? Provoked by my challenge, Ryan begrudgingly told me the name of his company. As he glared at me, I met his gaze and continued. That's one of our subsidiaries, isn't it? Didn't you realize that when I was talking about my company earlier? At my words, Ryan's face froze, unable to move. Mr. Woods, the president of your company, is well acquainted with me, and I've probably met your boss too. You get what I'm trying to say, right? Upon hearing this, Ryan began to tremble and sweat profusely. Oh, that's right. I just remembered I have something urgent to attend to. For a moment, he looked like he was about to cry, then weakly excused himself and hurried out of the restaurant. It was the first time I had spoken up so assertively to someone, and my hands were shaking. That guy, he left without paying a dime. Calm down, George, I'll take care of it. We sat down, apologized to the astonished women, and resumed the gathering. After Ryan left, the atmosphere of the drinking party became much more congenial. As we continued to talk, it turned out that George and Mia, whom he had referred to as old acquaintances, were actually cousins. They had arranged this gathering with their group to surprise their friend, who had received a job offer from my company. But who would have thought we'd run into him, I remarked. He was quite a character, they agreed, reminiscing with distant looks in their eyes. I still can figure out why Ryan has always had it in for me. I don't recall ever doing anything to him. When I expressed my confusion about Ryan, George looked at me in surprise. You hadn't realized? He asked, somewhat exasperatedly. Realized what? I inquired, with a laugh George shared. You might not see it, but you've actually had quite a few secret admirers all along. Secret admirers, I exclaimed in disbelief. Yes, indeed, George confirmed. According to George, I wasn't as unnoticed by others as I thought. I wasn't the type to seek the spotlight, but I was a strong supporter behind the scenes. I quietly took care of the minor tasks that others disliked. For such reasons, I was actually quite trusted. Apparently, there were even people who liked me for being this way. One of the girls Ryan was interested in was among them, and it seems that was the reason he harbored a complex towards me. Well, no matter the reason for his complex, his behavior is inexcusable, I stated. True, George agreed. You know, I've had my own complex about you, George suddenly confessed. To my surprise, he turned to the women and started talking about me. He's always been smart, you know, even when we played games together, his test scores were way better than mine. Annoying, right? And now he's the CEO of a huge company, he boasted about me on his own accord. Refusing to be outdone, a mysterious competitive spirit arose in me, and I decided to boast about George. George has also been doing great work for our hometown. My parents always praise him. Gradually, it turned into a debate about who was more impressive. The women laughed at our foolish exchange. It's nice to see how you both respect each other, they said. We won't be outdone, right? Saying this, the woman with the short haircut placed her hands on the shoulders of her friends sitting beside her and pulled them closer. Despite being at a mixer where usually people try to make themselves look good, the five of us somehow started a competition of boasting about everyone but ourselves. It was a peculiar drinking session, but it remained cheerful until the end. As it was getting late, we decided to call it a night. I offered to walk Mia home, while George would take the other two to the station. You're cousins, so you could go home together. I'll take the two to the station, I suggested. Sorry, it's a bit daunting to be driven home by a president who I'll be working for next year, so she says. The woman with the short haircut repeated her apologies to me. I reassured her there was nothing to apologize for. See you around, Nathan, George said as we parted. Yeah, invite me again, George. What are you talking about? You should invite me sometimes, like we used to, he replied with a teasing smile. I smiled back and simply said, sure, before turning to leave. We walked off in different directions. Mia and I walked down the dark street together. Upon reflection, this was also a first for me. I tried to think of something to say, feeling nervous. Before I could, Mia spoke up. Today was fun, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. There was a moment I wasn't sure how things would turn out. The incident with Ryan had already become a laughing matter. I was relieved it hadn't escalated. George always talked about you, Mia shared. Really? George did? Yes. Ah, that explains it. I remembered her expression when I introduced myself before entering the restaurant. I had heard so much about you and hoped to meet you someday. I never imagined it would be today. I'm not as great as he says, I modestly replied, starting to tire of the praise. However, that's not true. Meeting you today, I could tell you're a wonderful person who cares deeply about his friends, she said, looking away slightly. However, I didn't have the luxury to ponder the meaning of her actions. My heart was racing unusually fast, and I couldn't even meet her gaze. Mia, if it's okay with you, I was wondering, could we exchange contact information? I mustered all my courage to say these words for the first time in my life. I probably looked pathetic and shaky. Yet, she looked at me and smiled, saying, I'd be glad to. For someone like me, who rarely takes the initiative in social interactions outside of work, this moment felt like a miracle among miracles. A connection had been made. Let's cherish it, never allowing it to break. Since that day, the frequency of my visits back home has skyrocketed. It's to see Mia. George would say, what's this? You guys aren't officially an item yet. I, for my part, want to take things slow and not rush our relationship. Apparently, George is more anxious about it than we are, given how slowly I'm taking things. Ryan's name has somehow disappeared from the subsidiary's organizational chart. Rumor has it he did something major and resigned. Considering the issue hasn't reached me, it probably wasn't that significant. I asked George, and he mentioned that Ryan hasn't been seen around town lately. Where he is and what he's doing now, I have no idea. But well, he's probably getting by in his usual way, wherever he is. One day, back in my hometown, I was at a bar with George, just the two of us drinking. We chatted about recent events and various other things, with no particular focus. Especially about my relationship with Mia. He was persistent in asking for updates. But well, this kind of easygoing relationship is comforting. Though its form has changed since our childhood, the essence of our relationship remains unchanged. No matter if our families grow or we get older, we'll probably still be here, having these pointless conversations. Eventually, our drinks and snacks might turn into tea and cookies. George joked, sipping his drink. Hey, how many decades into the future are you talking? We laughed together at that. Even if I have few friends, having someone like George makes life enjoyable. Having a best friend is as good as having family. Sipping my drink, I was reminded of this once again.